Welcome back. You're watching Newslink here on ENCA. Well, there have been allegations that social media was used to incite major acts of violence during last week's unrest in Gauteng and KZN. But if you're on the receiving end of these messages and then decide to forward it on to others, what are the implications? Would you be considered as complicit in this case, mobilizing violence? Well, to answer these questions, we love going to Emma Sadler. She's our media law expert. Emma, do you need to cough? You poor thing. I'm so sorry. You haven't been well.
I haven't. I've been in hospital with COVID, but I'm back at my desk today, and I'm very, very lucky that I lived to tell the tale. It was there were some pretty dark times, but I'm very, very fortunate that I got good care, and I'm back in the game.
It's great to see your face. Emma, you know, I saw some of these WhatsApps that were coming in off an ANC WhatsApp group, and I was going to forward them to our work group, and then I thought, hold on a minute, am I not going to be culpable for something here? What's the protocol and the law with regards to passing on messages which purport to incite violence?
Yeah, I think the starting point, Annika, has to be that there's nothing different that applies in the world of social media to the real world. So if you would be successfully prosecuted for incitement in the real world because you gave a speech, for example, at a political rally, there is absolutely no difference in the laws that would apply if that message had been sent electronically. So that's got to be the starting point. We do have some new laws which are imminent. We've got the Cybercrimes Bill, which has been signed by President Ramaphosa, but it's sort of in this twilight period of not being effective because we're waiting for various regulations and for a promulgation date. But there's a very specific crime in that law which says that if you send an electronic message which promotes harm or damage to property, so either to a person or to their property, then that is a very specific crime under the Cybercrimes Act. Until that comes into force, because as I say, it's not actively in force yet, then what we have is the law that exists in the real world. So as I say, if you send a message, whether it's electronic or in the real world, the same laws would apply. And there have been charges laid in these cases, and I think that it's a good thing. And I think that we will see prosecutions in these cases because we've got to appreciate the role that social media has played in this unrest. And I think we do need to make a distinction, Annika, in the case you talk about where you're sharing the messages for journalistic purposes to show what's going on. You know, we have a principle in South African law called the chain of publication, which basically says that if you share content, you're responsible for that content. The exception to that is that if you share it very much with the purpose of this is outrageous, how can people be saying this, if it's racist, you know, look at this, go and lay a complaint to the Human Rights Commission, then you're not agreeing with the message. So there is a distinction, I think, between sharing it on and promoting it, so just sharing it in a vacuum, and sharing it for other purposes, for example, journalistic purposes or for the purposes of naming and shaming or to let people know what's going on.
You would expect Twitter, Instagram and Facebook to be able to moderate and stop, as they did in the US when they had that insurrection, to stop and close some accounts that seem to be insightful. But what about WhatsApp? How much power do they have to stop the flow of information?
You know, I think the biggest technological intervention that we saw last year, particularly in the context of the fake news pandemic, which is something that we were grappling with in a huge way this time last year, and actually government passed a specific law relating to fake news and COVID, which basically says if you share content with the intention to deceive somebody, then you can be arrested. And we did see arrests and we did see prosecutions. So I think that that is you know, it's quite analogous in terms of how we're going to combat it. So there are legal ways to combat it, which is what we've been talking about, finding out who's responsible for the content, who's the originator of the content, who shared it on, and prosecuting them. But there are huge technological interventions that happened. And the biggest one for me was what Facebook did with WhatsApp's forwarding messages, because I don't know if you remember this kind of time last year, if you received a video, you could just press forward and then tap 100 names on your phone and forward it to everyone. Now there's this block on WhatsApp, which basically says that you can only forward to one person at a time. And that was huge in combating, because people are lazy. You know, if you receive some kind of message inciting political, unrest or looting or arson or robbery or theft or whatever it is, and you just want to press a forward button, it's much, you've got to be really quite a lot more invested in it to sit and one by one forward those messages. So I think that was a good thing. Facebook does remove people from their WhatsApp platform if they find that they violate their rules. It's not very common, but we are seeing Facebook in a huge move to tidy up its own house because of a threat of greater regulation in the US, and threats that they're going to force Facebook to unbundle Instagram and WhatsApp. So we are seeing Facebook, Twitter, and Google scrambling to try and do better at monitoring and moderating what's on their own platforms, which is why we're seeing things like Julius Malema being banned from Twitter for a period of time, and of course the famous one, Donald Trump.
Thank you so much to media law expert Emma Sadler. Exercise caution, don't forward stuff if you don't agree with it, and we wish her well and hope she gets 100% better. Keep warm and safe.